بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين لله تعالى. Inshallah, today we're going to have just a quick reading session because we all are very occupied this morning, myself and the reader. So inshallah, we're going to have a brief reading session with not much commentary, and inshallah, we'll continue as normal tomorrow. Inshallah, let us recite Al-Fatiha to the soul of Sayyidina Al-Imam Al-Ghazali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Al-Fatiha. What page did we reach to?
We're on page 15, the bold section in the middle.
Okay, go ahead. Page 15, inshallah. Bismillah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, the cause of engaging in the science of juristic and theological differences. You should know that after Allah Ta'ala's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah Ta'ala's blessings and peace be upon him, the office of Khilafah was assumed by the rightly guided caliphs. The latter were leaders, had knowledge of Allah Ta'ala, exalted as He, possessed understanding of His rulings, and were able to issue religious edicts independently.
Here's
Thus,
something we should understand that after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those Al-Khulafa al-Rashidun, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, all of them, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, were knowledgeable scholars in the religious sciences. And they were true leaders among the companions. They were the best that the nation had to offer. Now, and that's part of our aqidah, to believe in their superiority after Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the order that they were the Khalifa, the ruler.
Thus, they sought the help of faqirs only on the rare occasions when consultation was necessary. Consequently, the real men of knowledge devoted themselves to knowledge of the afterlife and avoided issuing religious edicts and decisions relating to governing people in this world by delegating these matters to others. When the office of Khilafah was later assumed,
you want to see a system. So you had those great leaders, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. They were qualified. Around them were jurists among the Sahaba who they would consult whenever they had issues that they couldn't issue the proper legal ruling. So what I want to show you from this is that this was their structure. The leader was a scholar himself. Around that scholar were great scholars, jurists. And whenever that leader needed to consult, he consulted scholars like himself in the time of the Sahaba, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, right? So how we benefit from this? In our communities, we need knowledgeable leaders. And around them, we need to have knowledgeable people, right? So the leader should be knowledgeable. And at every generation, we want the leader to be more knowledgeable than the previous leader. That's what we should strive to do. So if we have an imam, that imam, wherever he may be at in his knowledge at the moment, we as a community need to strive to put around that imam knowledgeable people that hopefully will be more knowledgeable than him. We're going to make access that, you know what? The next generation of leaders will be, even if the imam is just a beginner, and that's what we have to work with. But the next generation are going to be more scholarly than him. until we reach the point where we have real scholars as leaders, right? That should be an objective that we strive for. In all of our communities around the country, the leaders are scholarly, right? And that is the example what we found in the early generations, right? So we have to revive that within our context until one day we have the vision that one day in our communities will be real trained Islamic scholars. But we started from where we're at. Does everyone understand that picture we're looking for that I'm talking about? Is this picture clear in your mind? Like, because before we can actually do it or realize it, we have to vision it. We have to have some kind of concept of what that looks like. And we have to believe it's possible, even with struggle. We have to see it. Like, that's important. And everyone has to see their role to play in that. Right? Everyone has to see their role. Now, go ahead.
When the office of Khilafah was later assumed by people who did not deserve it, they were forced to seek the help of faqihs and their company. At this stage, there remained men of knowledge among the tabi'in who followed in the footsteps of those who sought the afterlife. But when they were sought by the rulers, they shunned them and fled. The caliphs were consequently forced to insist on their pursuit and return for their appointment as judges.
Right, because when the leadership became corrupt, those pious scholars didn't want nothing to do with that, right? So that is also to show you that we need to ensure that leadership is trustworthy and upright, right? So we have this twofold. When we look at these things, don't look at it as a historical context. Look at it as how are we going to implement that in our lives now. So we need upright leadership and knowledgeable people. We have to work to establish that. Now,
when the people of those times saw the dignity of the men of knowledge and the rulers' demand for them, they longed to seek knowledge themselves, hoping thereby to obtain dignity and attain status with the rulers. Thus, they were engaged in learning the science of religious edicts and offered their services to the caliphs. The faqihs consequently sought after rulers, whereas before they were sought after. Previously, they were dignified because of shunning kings, but have become humiliated because of seeking the company of kings.
and here's one thing that we have done today that we must fix. The imams should be the leaders, not the rich and affluent who don't know the religion. And this system that has been set up especially in the West, where the masjid is ran by a board of directors who are not learned people. And the imam is a subject of a board who are not religious, learned people. This needs to change. The only way that changes is when the people start to support the masjid, and the masjid is not a monopoly, is not monopolized by the wealth of the rich. In other words, the rich pay for the masjid, so therefore they dictate the policy of the masjid. Whereas if we change that, where all of us do our part, the masjids will be supported by the people, not by a selected group of the rich people who actually dictate the policy based on what they want, not on religious rules. This is very important, because what will happen is you'll have your leaders who are chasing dunya, and the dunya is in the hands of the rich, so the rich will be dictating the rules of the religion. And this quite happens around the country too much. I'll leave that alone. My mind just starts running with things sometimes. We have to fix that. The way you fix that is that you have a grassroots movement that is active. You have a role in changing your condition, but you have to do your part. You have to do your part. Now,
In those times, there was much demand for knowledge of religious edicts and for settling people's disputes due to their extreme need in those areas. Then there came rulers who listened to people's discourses on dogmas and were inclined to hear the different arguments to substantiate them. When their desire for debate and argument about theology became known, people dedicated themselves to the science of theology, writing abundantly on the subject. Then, in later generations, some rulers disapproved of theology because of what it led to in terms of aggravated sectarianism. They became, therefore, more inclined towards debates on matters of fiqh, showing what is preferable to follow, especially in the schools of Ash-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa.
mm,
Thus, people abandoned speculative theology and ardently devoted themselves to questions of juristic differences, especially those between Abu Hanifa and Ash-Shafi'i. But they were lenient in the differences with Malik, Sufyan, and Ahmed. May Allah Ta'ala have mercy on their souls. This is the only motive for devotion to the knowledge of juristic and theological differences and debates. Indeed, had the souls of those possessing temporal power inclined themselves towards another type of knowledge, then these people would also have been inclined to it. The properties of the learner and the teacher, the proprieties, excuse me.
okay, stop there. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, we'll pick up tomorrow. I know you have to go, reader, so you could go ahead. Inshallah, may Allah reward you. Uh, and I'll just make some final comments for the next few minutes. Uh, one of the things that I want to really get forth to us in these classes, with these lessons, I want to inspire us to aim for higher objectives in our communities. I want us to see ourselves on the world stage, not stuck just in our environments, right? Look for tomorrow, please. Look for what our Islam is going to look like when we're gone. Have a picture of what we would like to see, and now start working on that picture, right? For instance, from my side, I would like to see traditional Sunni Islam as the standard in the Black community. And by extension, I would like to see it the standard in all of our communities. One is easier for me than the other. What do I mean? The former is easier for me than the latter. I'm in the Black community, so I can have an easier impact in the community that I'm in. But I can also reach to other communities, which inshallah we do, and inspire those people within those communities to do the same work. And then we come together. So for instance, you may hear me talking a lot about Black issues, right? I do. And I'm deliberate about it. When I talk about the black community, I'm deliberate in what I'm saying. I'm not trying to apologize, right? I'm specifically talking about the black community for a reason. Because that community, which I'm a part of, has been a community that has been treated like laboratory mice and experimented upon for other people's benefit. I'll repeat that. The black community within Islam, the black Muslim community, has been treated like laboratory mice. And people have been experimenting on them for their benefit. So that's an issue. And you know what kind of cruel things are done to laboratory mice. You do realize the cruelty that is performed on laboratory mice. That same cruelty, in a figurative way, has been employed in the black Muslim community. I'll give you one thing to think about. I want to take an experiment with us. Give me, we're going to do this together. It's a joint project real quick. Nine Islamic qualifications that a person needs to be considered a scholar. Y'all ready? 9, just 9. So we're going to make us think a little bit. 9 qualifications in Islamic knowledge that someone at least needs at minimum to be considered a scholar. Give me 9. Let's together. 9 qualifications that someone needs to be considered an Islamic scholar. This should be relatively easy, so let's go. Y'all ready? Come on, together. So I said 9 qualifications of knowledge that someone needs to be considered an Islamic scholar. Okay? Grammar, right? Nahwu, sarf, grammar, conjugation of words, right? Balagha, Arabic. So Arabic. Okay. What else? Knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Logic. Okay. 6. Come on. 7, usul al-fiqh. Go ahead. Fiqh. 8. So we got 8 so far. Come on. Y'all saying the same thing. So when you put up, if it's the same thing that was already said, I don't mention it. So we got like 8 things. Go ahead. 9, usul al-hadith. Good. And of course, carrot and all that, 10. Aqidah, 10. All right. Tafsir, 11. Good. Usul al-tafsir, 12. Good. We got the point. Now, they need all of that. You said these are qualifications. They need all of that to be considered a scholar. Now, in those things, if we want to say the knowledge of those things, which percentage of each of those would you expect to be known by that person, encompassing that field? What percent before we consider him respectable in the field? What percent of that field should he have a level of competence in? A percentage before we respect them in that field. He don't have to be a master. Let's say before he's respectable, we can actually respect his understanding of that field. What percentage will we give him? Say 75%? What do we say? 75, Selena, right? 95%? Man, he got to be a genius, Habibi. 90%? Okay, let's say I would think a medium. 80%, 85%, in the middle somewhere, right? Right? So even if we said, when we take into consideration, he must know all this stuff, because that's what you just said. These are 9 qualifications. You gave 10, 11, or 12. Now, I want to be honest with ourselves. Do we know anybody like that in our communities? Do we? We mentioned all that stuff. Do we know anyone like that? Honestly, I'm not guessing. I really know someone's like that. Do we? Not guessing, not giving the benefit of the doubt. I really know someone's like that. Do we? No. So, therefore, we have a job to do. Because we said that we must develop scholarship. There's our objective. There's a goal for us. We all agree that we don't know no one like that. But we must have someone like that. What are we going to do about it? Right? What are we going to do about it? We can't keep saying we don't have something. What are we going to do about it? We have to produce it. What is the means to produce that? We got to get serious to start developing such an environment, because we need it. Even if we don't reach it while we're alive, we got to set the ball in motion. That's what we need in our communities. If we're ever going to build what we imagine in our minds, what we just talked about, if we're ever going to do that, we're going to need that stuff. Now, what does it take? Now, let me ask you a question. How many of us have went overseas, or that we know from our communities, people who went overseas for 4 years or more? How many people we know they went overseas for 4 years or more before they've returned? I don't need you to name people. How many people know people and from our communities that went overseas for 4 years or more? How many of you know people like that? Just say me. They're from our communities. They're from our people. They went overseas for 4 years or more, and they've come back. So we know people like that, right? I'm trying to put a concept in your mind so you can see something. So we know these people. They went 4 years or more. And why do I say 4 years or more? Because to complete a school, if you start, you can finish in 4 years. Like the average school in the Islamic world, they'll you can graduate in 4 years, right? You can. And then when I say more, that's if you have Arabic problems and or you study extended, so it can go more. But 4 years minimum, and then above that, right? Now, uh, now we looked at the result of that. So they went overseas, they studied, they spent years, and they still not like that. So what does that tell us? That's not going to work alone. That's not going to work. It should tell us that. That alone is not going to work. And I'll tell you something. Why it doesn't work. It will never work. You know why it doesn't work? Because most of the people who go overseas, they go overseas for themselves, not for the communities, with the intention of going overseas to produce a certain result. That's the problem. So you don't go overseas with it laid out already. Why you're going, what you're doing, what you need, and this is the objective at the end of it. That's missing. And the community itself doesn't see how what you're going to do is going to put the community in a certain state. So it needs to be on both ends. Do you follow my point? It needs to be on both ends for it to work. Most people go overseas and they do a curriculum that is designed for other than themselves. So they go to the school, the curriculum in the school is designed for the people in that area, not for what you're doing. So you spend most of your years learning something or learning in a way that doesn't fit what you're going to confront. It's a problem. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And you just proved it don't work by my questioning. It doesn't work. So we have to do something different. That's not working. It's not working at all. We have to change the narrative. It's extremely important that we do something different. And what that different thing is as an idea, and we're going to talk about it more and more and more. Number one, while that person is overseas learning, we have to simultaneously in our community be learning the same thing. Do you see my point? So if the person is overseas learning, what is he learning and what is the community while he's gone? What are they learning? It needs to be a connection. It needs to be a connection. So a connection with an end goal, an end objective that brings those two things together. Right? So we don't have a person who went to learn and really didn't learn what we need and then comes back and we're not prepared for what they even learned. It's going to be a conflict all the time. And we can take a look at other countries. Take like Malaysia, Indonesia, places like that. Before they send their students to study, they already built that structure within their communities. So when their students go to study, They go with a certain objective that when they return into an environment that is suitable for what they went for. They didn't just go for themselves. They went in general with the support of their communities for an objective. That's how they started governments and rulers and leaders and organizations. You follow my point? And there you'll notice that on the world stage, they are authoritative because there was a whole system in place. And that's what we need in the Black community. That's what we need in the West, not just the Black community. Because there's two things why I say in the Black community. Because in the West, there is segregation without the name. In the Muslim West, especially America, there is segregation without the name of segregation. You do realize that, right? Let me make sure we are on the same page. We do realize that segregation exists in the Muslim communities in America without the name. We do realize that, right? We're not oblivious to this point, right? I'm just making sure I'm not talking to the insane, right? We do know what we're talking about, right? That's real. That exists. We just don't call it segregation. There is segregation in our communities, and it's clear as the sun on noonday. So with that being reality, we have to deal with reality. We cannot act like it doesn't exist, or we're fooling ourselves. So the Black community, the Black Muslim community, has to independently strengthen itself. And then the other communities have to have a healthy respect and relationship with the Black community. And then once they have that healthy respect and that development from the Black community, they can mutually agree on a collective benefit as a whole in America. Do y'all follow that? Without all these things happening, we're headed for problems in the future. This is extremely important. It's extremely important to understand these things. If we don't, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Don't think ignoring a problem is going to make it go away. That never happens. You can't ignore a disease and hope that it's not going to get better. It's going to get better. That doesn't work like that. You have to actively treat it. You have to actively engage in its treatment. You can't ignore it. So for us, now that's just local. We ain't talking about the world stage, because ultimately, as an ummah, we have to work on the world international stage. I'm just talking right now on the local stage. These are things we have to start thinking about and talking about, right? And the African American community desperately needs discussion on how to achieve its own internal unity. And these are difficult discussions. Right? These are difficult discussions. And we can't run from them either. Right? And I mentioned all these things with solutions, that we start engaging in the actual reformation of our communities. We have to engage actively, not just theory. We have to practically do things, right? so that we can get that end goal, right? And we cannot just wishfully think it through, like, man, inshallah, it's going to happen. Yeah, inshallah, it will when you start working. Right? Inshallah, it will help. It will happen when you start working. Human beings get nothing except what they strive for. That's the sunnah of Allah and His creation. You don't just sit around and it happens. It doesn't work that way. You have to do something, right? So we got a picture from what Imam Ghazali mentioned. Uh, and we just got to start working on that. And that's what we're doing, right? And I beg you to start thinking about this issue and your role in bringing it to reality. Every one of us start thinking, what's my part? What can I actually do to make this happen? And all of us have a role. All of us, every one of us have a role in it. And I realize, even from my side, I realize I have a role. I have a role. I have to do my part, right? I have a role. And you know what? I look at myself and I say to myself, your role, one of your roles, I won't say all of it, is to do your best to articulate what we need Islamically, even if you don't have it, right? I don't have it. I'm not what we need. I understand that. uh, I I understand. That's why it's so heavy on me, because I don't have what we need. I'm not deluded, but I know what we need. Even though I don't have the tools, I know the tools we need. Now, my job is to find among us those who have the capacity to earn those tools and to use them. That's my job, right? You know, I used to work construction. I don't know anything about, actually have a trouble banging a nail. Right? But I used to run construction jobs. I told you I have trouble banging a nail straight, right? What I do know is how to see a job, know what needs to get done, and then help everyone do their part to finish. I know how to do that. I'm good at that, right? So that was my job, right? I would make sure everybody else do the right work. And I got paid big money to do that. But I helped get the building together. In fact, I was crucial in making sure that building is finished and done on time. Very crucial. But I couldn't do the work that those skilled workers could do. I can do it. The plumber, the electrician, the carpenter, the laborer. Uh, I can't do none of that stuff. But I can make sure they do it and they do it correctly. So that was a role I had, right? But they had their roles to do their jobs correctly too, on time. I had to be able to see the whole project and what it's going to look like, even though it's not finished. In my area, then some are going to do their area. But my area, I got to do my area. I got to make sure that it works. right? And I remember, I'll just tell a joke. Someone said to me, because I used to go to work and I would just have on my headphones and listening to Islamic lectures and walking the floors. That's what I used to do every morning, right? Sometimes 12 hours a day. And one of the guys said, "You don't do nothing," because he was working and doing a lot of work, but that's his job. You just walk around bossing people around. I said, "No, I don't. I'm making sure this thing gets done." And then I told the person, just because we were all cool. I said, "Today, I'm going to let you walk with me and see what I do. I'm going to get somebody in your spot, and I'm going to let you roll around with me and help me." And that person rolled with me. You're talking about a building that's 50 something stories high. Huge building. Over $1 billion project. I said, "Roll with me." And he's walking. And he's seeing all that I have to do. And we finished. He apologized. He's like, "Wow, I didn't know you do all that." You got to know where everyone is, and you got to chase some dudes who's trying to hide from working, and you got to know where they doing, what they doing, and who's not doing what, and where they hiding at. In this big old building, you got to know all that stuff. Because you know people don't want to work. Right? They're going to hide. They're going to do all kinds of stuff. Right? You got to know all that. You got to know which trade is doing what, where, when, and you got to make sure it's ready. That's your job. Right? That's what we got to do in our communities. Seriously. The only difference in that, in our community, you can fire somebody if they ain't do their job. Right? So if you don't cooperate, I'm laying you off. You can count on it. You're out of here. Right? You're gone. Count on it. Right? But in our communities, people don't have to do anything. And there's no consequence, which is bad. So the only thing that can give us the motivation to work is that we all got to have an interest. Number one, it should be earning the pleasure of Allah. But if we're not there, at least start thinking about your children's future tomorrow. Do you want your children to be in the same environment you're in? The answer should be no. You should want a better environment, a better community, more access to Islamic knowledge. That's what you should want. Better to financial stability, economic stability. You should want that for your children and your grandchildren, and you should see to your great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren. That's where we should be. And then start working to what is needed to do that. We need to. So while we're learning, we're not just learning for ourselves. I guess this is a point that I want to make. We're not learning just for ourselves. We're going to go away, right? We're going to go away. All of us. Kullu nafsun dha'iqatul maut. We're all going to go away. All of us. What are we leaving behind? What is our legacy? What is our legacy? What is our legacy? That's a question. What is our legacy? And in our communities, we need to formulate legacy. Because listen, we had great leaders. We had Malcolm X. That the one they've made us celebrate only him. Okay, alhamdulillah. We had Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah ta'ala. We still starting over from where he left off, right? We're still doing his same work decades later. And one of the things, the reason why is because we didn't support him and we are not supporting ourselves like we should. We didn't support him and we're not supporting ourselves like we should. That's why we're in the same conditions, right? And I would venture to say we're in worse conditions because we don't realize our condition. We're deluded by our own successes. And that's something we got to work on. So these gatherings that we're having is not just about learning Islamic knowledge. It's a part of it. But actually, with all the things we're doing in these platforms, we're trying to build something that's going to go on for generations, and that's going to improve generation after generation after generation. That's what we're trying to do, right? Do y'all understand that? Are y'all with me? Y'all understand what I'm talking about? Because it's essential. I need you to do it, right? Do you understand first? Because you're not going to do something you don't understand, right? Because we need each other. Without each other, it's never going to happen. It's just wishful thinking. It's going to be another I have a dream speech. And we can't continue down that road, right? We can't continue down that road. And no one said it's going to be easy. It's not. It's not going to be easy. That's why we have to become a family. It's important. Really, we have to become a family. These are some real ambitious objectives that I'm talking about. It's like, whoo, very ambitious. But we can do it. And it don't take a lot of people, trust me. It just takes a handful of sincere people. We can get it done. We can do it. But I'm telling you, we need a critical mass. We do need a critical mass because that critical mass is going to motivate others, right? So inshallah, we'll see you tonight. What's today, Friday? Okay, tonight, Sheikh Walid al-Rifai with his 40 hadith at 7 o'clock. I think it's 7 o'clock. Yeah, so inshallah, join in and I'll see you tomorrow morning, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.